It's all for you. Yeah, yo. There whenever it matters, and even more when you feel like it doesn't. Protect you so you never feel like you wasn't. Know I'm right alongside you. Either that or I'm behind you, but always got you. End of discussion, nothing means more. First one to offer is shoulders for what you reach for. Thought I saw the eyes of the world until I seen yours. And know that I ain't see a better view yet. I'm with whatever, so don't ever you fret. Know that you covered, not a hurdle or a heartbreak. A change what a partake, cause none of them won't ever get comfortable in your walkway. My job is to aware you, fully loaded, prepare you for all of the above that I'm never letting get near you. But still in all, give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Hi, my name is Ranzo of the Melanated Farms. We've interviewed over 100 people right across Asia, black people primarily. And there's one answer that seems to be consistent that I receive no matter who I interview, no matter where they're from. There's one answer that is the same amongst a very diverse group of people. It does not matter if these black people hailed from Africa, Europe, the Caribbean, North America, wherever. This answer seems very, very consistent whether we asked the men or the women, what do you like the most about this country in Asia or that country in Asia? And the question that we're going to try to answer with this documentary is, why are black people moving to Asia?
Hey everyone, this is Ishmael from Dad is Not a Noun. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm doing the best I can. I'm truly excited to have this particular guest on. I've been a big fan of him since 2017. His name is Ranzo. He is the founder and the host of the Black Experience in Japan. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming on. One of the videos I found kind of therapeutic for myself was the video you just posted recently about the last sunset of 2020 in Mount Fuji. I thought that was awesome. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? Because that kind of encapsulated everything of 2020 into 2021. Can you talk about that?
So you mean like what I spoke about in the video itself?
Yes.
Wow. That was a beautiful moment. So thinking back, it was very cold. It was very cold, right? But it was beautiful because Mount Fuji was across from the lake. And the sun was setting toward the right of it. And it was a sort of year I was being introspective of 2020. COVID-19 came in like a whirlwind. And it really like gave the world a blow, like a shot, man. Even myself had so many travel plans, right, for the first quarter, so many different countries. And COVID-19 came in, and I'm like, I had to change my plans. I only made it to Singapore. That was it. And then I couldn't go anywhere else. So I was talking about reprioritizing things in my life because I was focused on BJ so much. Usually I'm the type of person that, if I'm going after something, I'm like all in. And it's like the first thing, the second thing, maybe the last thing, and then everything else after that. Whether it's my relationship with God, I believe suffered. My family life, usually sometimes I'm editing, my daughter would come into my office and stuff, and I'd be like, I'm working, I'm like, I'm doing this. I'm like, I'll talk to you in a second. And I realized that, man, like first things weren't first in my life. Right. And then COVID-19, that time, it was a year where I started to re-examine myself and started to say, you know what, let me put first things first. Because even if you get to the pinnacle of what you're going after, right? It's like at the end of the day, like what really matters, like what then? And I just started thinking about a lot of stuff about what really matters. And 2020 was that year for me because we had a lot of time to think, trust me. So it was the video was just me just unpacking and just being transparent and vulnerable in the moment as well. Talking about just what 2020 represented, me reprioritizing my life and putting first things first, God, my family, then BG and my other pursuits. So that was what it represented for me. It was a tough year for a lot of people. I had to go back to Jamaica to my a funeral. My grandmother passed away as well, and that was another emotional roller coaster. There's the way that whole thing happened. Then to travel in the midst of COVID-19 is another thing. Man, the world ain't the same, bro. That's definitely for sure. It's very different. But 2020 was a sobering year. And I think it was a year that will catapult me into my destiny and purpose more accurately. So that was what it represented for me. Yeah,
definitely. And then one thing I got from that video is, and it was just a beautiful thing to see you evolve as a human being. You felt like, you did your work of changing the narrative when it came to Black people. Because I know, like the reason you started the Black experience in Japan was, your father wasn't there when you were little, and you were looking at superheroes, heroes, and so that's the reason why you created a Black experience Japan. But at the same time, seeing that video, you said, you know what? There's more to life than changing the narrative. It's a spiritual part that I'm seeking. What I mean? So can you kind of break that down for me a little bit?
Okay, that's big. That's big. You know what? I started to think, man. It's like it's crazy. From what I believe, right? I'm a Christian, right? So from my faith perspective, I usually, every time I read the Bible and I read about read the words of Jesus Christ, it's very specific in what he requires.
Right.
And I'm used, like when I see it, I'm like, man, I look at it and I look at my life. Like I look down at the page and I look up at my life, and I look around me and I'm trying to find something that represents what's in the word. I'm like, it's lacking somewhere. But first I got to start with myself. And I'm like, Ranzo, are you actually living your life in this way? And I wasn't, because he wasn't first. And I listened to someone at one point, I can't remember when, that said, he's like, everyone has a sort of that place in their life, that spot that God fills. But if you're not pursuing or following God, something else is God for you. So if it's not your relationship with him, it's maybe your business, your career, whatever it's money, whatever. So it's like everyone has that seat in them. So if God is not sitting there, it's something else. And whatever that thing is, that's your God. I was like, man, that hit me. I'm like, wow. I'm like, I'm looking at my life and I'm like, what's in that seat? And it wasn't God. He wasn't number one.
Right.
Like I call myself like a grinder. Like I work super hard. If I'm going after something, look, when I was doing like before COVID-19, I was doing interviews. I was working like all the time. I'm like traveling, like it's my whole life.
Right.
And I'm like, man, where was God? Like maybe I might pray 1 and 2 times, but he wasn't the number one thing in my life. And with the narrative of Black people changing the narrative, we know that there's a problem. Yes. And as recent as last night, I watched a movie called Woodlawn. Okay. Amazing movie. Amazing. You need to watch it. It's about this football player, American football player. His name is Tony. I can't remember his last name at this moment, but it was during the racial segregation era in the 1970s, right? 60s, 70s coming up. And they never wanted him to play on the football field because he was Black. Right. And I was looking at just what Black people had to go through. This guy was talented. And I'm like, man, I feel the pain, and I'm like, I understand. I can identify with the pain.
Right.
And I'm like, man, so there is a problem. Right. And when we look at the narrative from then until now, like most of the movies we see, Black people are painted in a negative light.
Yes.
And then when we move overseas, like I'm in Japan and other countries, you can see the effects of that. Someone sees you, they don't see you as an individual. They don't see Ishmael first. They see what they've seen on the TV screen. Maybe this is who this person is. Right. So there's this preconception. And I'm like, okay, so there's a problem. So I'm like, you know what? So I set out, of course, I started the Black Experience Japan, showing Black people as who they are, not who people think we are.
Yes.
And but at the same time, I'm like, okay, we've made inroads. We've made some progress, right? Our videos have been watched millions of times, and people have reached out to me, and I know that it has changed people's lives that appeared on the channel, and people who have seen it in some way, shape, or form, or at the very least, they were inspired in some capacity. But the question I was posing last year in that video, the live stream was, okay, so let's say we get to that place, right?
Right.
Where we get our due, we there's equity, we're equal, we're treated the way we ought to be treated, we're there. Right now we start, maximizing our potential. No one is trying to stonewall us. No one is trying to keep us down, hold us down. We're ready. We're out there thriving. I'm like, okay, what's next? Because that's not all there is to life, and it's a fact, right? I was listening to a guy. I was working out last night, and there was a dude. His name is something King. It's an African guy.
Okay.
And the guy started a business at 37, retired at 44, right? Wealthy man, like dude, like multi-millionaire now, right? And the man died last year, shortly thereafter. And I'm watching this guy. He's a motivational speaker. He was a motivational speaker. He's sharing his story, all these things. I'm like, man, this guy is so inspirational. But then the man died. Like young man, like in his 40s. Right? Like from what I see, I think he's in his 40s. And the man died. So now I'm like, bro, like the man has everything material wise. Yeah. He's doing his work and then now he's gone.
Right.
So I'm like, wait, that's it? Right? I'm like, there must be something more. Because even if you get all the things you want, there's something greater. So for me, I'm like, man, I don't want to stop at changing an image alone. Okay, what's next? What about the soul? Because some people believe that there's nothing else, but I believe there's something more. And I've had different experiences in my life that testifies to me about the fact that God is. And I'm like, okay, since God is, it means that there's more than just, like changing the image of Black people, the narrative, being successful in the world. There's something else. There's something greater. And I'm like, man, I have to, the mission is lopsided. Right. It has to be balanced. Yeah. Right. So it's like, okay, like while we're changing the narrative of Black people in the world, we also need to make people know that, look, your soul has value. There's importance. There's importance there. There's more to this life afterwards. So you need to make sure that, okay, once you've changed the image of Black people and you've done this, make sure that your heart is right, your soul is right with God. So after you leave, because the journey continues. Yeah, that's the thing. The journey continues, right? It's not that it stops after you've amassed whatever. It continues. So if you stop there, it's incomplete. And then greater struggle awaits. Yes. Right. So it's like, okay, you've overcame the struggle in this life. Right. And you think you're good, but there's something greater, something worse. Right. So we need to make sure that yes, we do what we can in this world, but also even greater still is our salvation and what comes next. Right. So that's where my mind is. I'm like, man, because I believe it. And I'm like, I can't just be talking to people about one side, right, not the other. I'm like, this is my foundation. I'm like, this is where I'm doing this from. I'm doing this thing from my heart from the beginning. It wasn't about anything else. It was literally a heart project. Like that's where it's coming from. And it became what it became. I never knew that was going to happen, but it did. But if someone asked me like, how, I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I was just following my heart. And I'm like, man, I'm not sharing this part of me. I intentionally avoided conversations about God because I felt like it was polarizing. And I felt like people, just the way that some people have responded since I've started talking about God, I'm like, okay, I knew that was going to happen. But I'm like, you know what? I felt like God gave me all the platform, for instance. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to lose it by talking about him, I'm like, so be it, because he's a foundation. That's the truth. All right. And so that's why I was grappling with that. I was struggling last year because I felt like God spoke to me. Well, I knew that God spoke to me last year, actually. And I'm like, at the time that he spoke to me, I'm like, man, why now? It was my wife can tell you, man. I was like, man, I'm like, why now? I'm like, what? And that's the thing, the struggle between, our temporal life and our eternal life. Right. It's like continual until we leave this planet, right? Because we're thinking about all the things here. Yeah. right? And then we're thinking about, okay, we want to make sure we're somewhere else, like where God is afterwards. Right. And we can't, and the Bible says you can't serve two gods. Right. And like, I guess I was serving two gods. I was double-minded because I'm like, okay, I want to build this thing. I have all these ideas about BJ and all these things. And I'm like, man, God, how am I going to do this if you want me to do this? So he wanted me to shift my focus as well. Right. So I believe so. I know, like, I'm long-winded. Forgive me.
No, go for it, brother.
Okay. But in a nutshell, it's that we shouldn't only focus on the things concerning this life, right? Because God is beyond this life. And it's almost like you're treating the outside of something and not the inside, right? So you take a shower, you get some cologne on, put on some good clothes, but at the same time, you're not eating right? You're not putting in the right thing inside you. You're not taking care of your inside as your outside. And even if outside look good, if you don't feel great, if you're unhealthy, I'm like, what can you really do? You can't go anywhere. You can't enjoy yourself, really. So I think it's like a complete picture. And that's what I want to do going forward. It might be a different approach because I know some people have different things to say about it.
Right.
I'm not exactly sure how to merge the two at this stage exactly. I'm still working on that, but that's what I want to do because I can no longer neglect that side. Because it is actually the most important side. Some people beg to differ, but I'm like, yeah, that's been the greatest part of my life, man. Because I've been through some rough times and stuff like that, and that was a part that upheld me. So I'm like, without that, nothing matters. Yeah,
and I value that you stick to your truth, and I direct the correlation to like Dr. King, right? When the civil rights bills were signed, he stuck to his truth. He went against the Vietnam War, and when he did that, he lost a lot of support, especially through the Black community, as well as his next thing was the poor people movement. That was his next thing that he was trying to get everybody together because he thought like that was going to be the next fight was between the have and have nots. And unfortunately, he was assassinated, and so what he started. So I put those correlations together because at the end of the day, you're sticking to your truth.
Yeah,
that's the most important thing. You may lose a lot of people. That's fine, as long as you stick to your truth and you look yourself in the mirror every day and say, you know what, I'm doing the right thing. That's the most important thing. And that's the one thing a lot of people don't realize is like, before Dr. King was assassinated, he lost a lot of support. He was like a man in an island by himself.
Wow.
And nowadays, people love him. Everybody quote him. But, a couple of months before he died, he was literally by himself. But, but that's the reality. But going back to the beginning, right? You're originally from Jamaica, right?
Yeah.
Tell me the experience of living in Jamaica, and then like what got you into Japan? What kind of like tickle the feathers? Like, you know what? I want to go to Japan.
Okay. So yeah, that story. So I grew up in Jamaica. And I've always been creative, artistic, right? So like, for instance, I used to draw a lot and stuff like that, and paint and all that artsy stuff. And I was introduced to anime one day randomly. I can't remember. I was maybe, I don't know, 9, 10, I don't know. And all my cousins, because for some reasons, the boys in the family all can draw like really well. I'm not sure why. It's like a boy thing. So we went to our neighbor's house, all of us, and then I think when we opened the door, we were there. I think we were watching something and this anime came on. So all of us were introduced to it at the same time. I was like, oh snap, look at this thing, look at these characters. Like, oh my God, it was crazy. And that was my first introduction to anime. And then it was, I think it was in high school. My brother was telling me this because I never even remember the details. He's like, oh, remember you said you were going to study Japanese because you wanted to understand anime more. You wanted to understand the language. I'm like, oh, that's what I said. I'm like, I never recall. I was like, I went to a language school in Jamaica, right? Okay. But it was only for like 1 year to study Japanese. And so I did that. And even in high school, everyone kept asking me. I guess I was talking about it a lot. Like, when are you going to Japan? Because I guess I just started talking about Japan all the time. And went to the language school, and then that was kind of like, I'm like, okay, Japan at some point. But I never went to Japan right after.
Right.
I immigrated to Canada. Right. Okay. So that's the move. And then Japan kind of just became phased out of my mind for some reason, until one day I had this part-time job. And I had a small business I was trying to build on the side as well. And just to show you the serendipity of life, how life works. I planted a seed, I guess, or God had a plan for me. So I was talking about Japan all this time, went to the school, got the basics and all that down with the language. Then I was at the school talking to a manager in the department I was working in. Mm-hmm. I was doing this thing that you call tabling, and she was coming in. We started having a conversation randomly one day. She was just walking by, started talking, and we started talking about Japan. I can't remember how the conversation started, like what triggered the Japan talk, but she had lived in Japan for 2 years, right? So I think she was a teacher or something like that. She did something for 2 years. And then I'm like, snap. Then in that moment, everything came back to my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, Japan, right? So I'm like, okay. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I want to go. She's like, you should, and stuff. I'm like, okay. I think she told me the program or something like that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk to my wife when I go home. The very same day, went to my house, spoke to my wife about it. I'm like, look, hey, like, what do you think about Japan? My wife wanted to go to another country to get her master's. I remember at one point before we met, like, that was something that she wanted to do. And I'm like, what do you think about Japan? Because it seemed like she liked traveling. So I'm like, what about Japan? And she's like, okay. She was down. She's like, okay, let's try it. And the program that she applied for, because she's actually a trained teacher, right? The deadline was 2 weeks away. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
2 weeks away. So, and the window period was, right. I think it was an 8 months window, 8 months, right? So, and then when the conversation happened, it was within the last 2 weeks. There was 2 weeks left. Imagine if we had that conversation like 3 weeks. Everything was just like perfectly positioned for, and I'm a man of action, right? So if I say I'm going to do something, I'm not going to wait. So we already had a conversation. I'm like, okay. As I reached home that same day after work, had the conversation with my wife. Right. She's down because she's down like that. Applied or whatever. And a few months after, we got a call. Right, she did the process, and then she got through, and then we were selected to come to Japan, to Tokyo actually. Because the good thing about that was we had a friend that lived in Tokyo, so I guess they wanted us to be close to the friend and stuff like that, right? And yeah, we got our first choice, which was cool because they ask you, where do you want to go in Japan, right? And we came, and that's how we came. Wow. And it was like, so it was, I think it was November 2015. I spoke to the manager, I believe, and then that was a deadline that month as well. And then 2016, we were in Japan. Wow. Right. So that was a journey. I never had any intention to start BJ, but BJ just kind of grew out of just the experience. And as well, before even that, my social media introduction, because it's a unbroken line if you think about it, was in 2015. I did live streams, right? Oh. But I was praying for people, right? So my live stream was motivational at first. I think I did like motivation for maybe 2 days or something like that. Right. And my wife was like, well, I can't remember the exact conversation, but I know I was doing something for 2 days on the live stream. And she's like, she suggested, why don't you just pray for people? Right. And so what I did was, I'm like, okay, cool. Because I'm known as I think I'm a man of faith. Like usually, like I usually have a pretty strong faith. Like I believe crazy stuff, and people sometimes think I'm crazy, but I just believe God so strong. Right. Because I think he can do anything. That's my position. It's not me, it's him. Right. So I kind of just use my faith to help people. Right. So I would pray for them. I'm like, I send a prayer request. I was doing that every single night. And the business I had at the time, custom clothing business, weren't really making money. That's why I was doing the part-time job, and I'm trying to do this business on the side. It wasn't really making no money, to be honest. We couldn't survive from what we were making. And then for some reason, I don't even know. I think it was because I decided to just do this for God. That's my thinking. I think God blessed because of that. Blessed what I was doing. Because I was praying for people every single night. So that was my first introduction into social media, right? Really doing this thing, doing live streams, praying for people. Some people came on, they mocked me, but you had a good amount of people who came on with good intentions. They wrote their prayer requests. I would pray for them on the live stream. And then I remembered it was a pastor that called me one day, and he had an order. There was a conference coming up, right? And I think it was a really small order. I think it was 30 pieces at first. And then, long story short, that became 500 plus pieces. Wow. And that was what started me. I'm like, I pivoted my business now to provide custom clothing services. Right. Because before I was selling my own designs. Right. So I was trying to sell people something that I wanted to sell them, right? But when the pastor called, and the thing is, I'd never done that before. Right. He asked, like, oh, do you do stuff for people? And I'm like, look, I read like a lot of motivation, personal development books and stuff like that, and I study business and stuff like that. So for me, my mind is always like, I ain't gonna say no. I'm like, even if I don't know how to do it, so I'm like, yeah. And then I figure the thing out afterwards. And let me get some water real quick. I talk too fast. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine, brother.
So I said yes, but I hadn't done this before. You know, I'm like, yes. And then I figured it out. And that order became a big order. And then that was what set me up. And now I started to do stuff for restaurants. It was mostly B2B, right? So restaurants, consultation companies. And one of the last places I did that was pretty significant before I moved to Japan was a bank. I started like providing stuff for banks as well. Right. So I was growing and stuff. And I guess my parents were they weren't happy that I was moving to Japan, because they're like, yo, now you're doing something, he's growing, you're doing good. Like, what are you doing? You're leaving to go to this country now, right? Because they know like I was grinding. And even when I left my job to do the business full time, they were not in approval because my daughter was super young. But the thing is, my faith, I believe, got so strong. So I know people don't understand because they think I'm crazy, but they're like, you have a newborn baby, you have a wife, you can leave your job, dude, like to pursue this business that might not work. Are you nuts? Right. But I just believed. It's just a thing. I don't know. So I did it and it worked. Thank God for that. And anyway, so they saw the progression, and they never believed that the business was going to work. Right. But now they saw it. And then when I was leaving for Japan, I'm like, look, they never approved. I'm like, look, when I was in the business, y'all never believed it was going to work anyways. Right. So when y'all are talking about stuff, I'm like, let my eye see. I'll see. I can see what I see. Y'all can't see it. Right. So this is what I want to do. Right. So we kind of went to Japan. So that was kind of like the backstory. And what happened with that platform was, when I moved to Japan, I changed it from praying for people to live streams. So what I was doing was I was showing people in Japan. I'm like, okay, let me just show them my experience. Right. And that was, yeah. Anyway, so I think that's why God is like coming back now to say, what are you doing? So I did that, and someone suggested, they're like, hey, why don't you do YouTube? Right. So I moved from I did live stream still. That's what I started with. I did live stream still. Then I moved to YouTube, started doing videos, right? I'd never done videos really before that. And I just started doing like vlogs, right? And then from vlogs, people kept asking me, even the live stream, about just the Black experience, like what it's like being Black. They see a Black man in Tokyo, they're like, what's going on? So people started asking those questions. And I kind of just use my journalism background from Jamaica to just kind of like form this thing. And that wasn't that people never really cared about it in the beginning, but I did. Right, because I just, as I always said, everything I do from my heart. I try to, right? That's the first place. I don't think about anything else. Like, I'm just going with what I want to do with my heart. And so I was excited about the whole project. Interviewing people. At the time on my phone, I keep saying that I'm like, I started from the bottom, kind of just on my phone, and then worked my way up. But I guess I wasn't trying to work my way up, but I'm just saying that I started from the bottom with the phone, and then it became popular. I never knew that was going to happen. Right. And then I kind of just started just keep doing what I'm doing and trying to improve. And even now I'm still trying to improve because I still make some mistakes and stuff like that. But the goal is to become better and better, every single day. So that's the journey from there till now. I know I'm bringing back God in it full circle. So it's like,
and that's the important thing, is that you don't even realize it, that you got a master's in networking. If you think about it, but you're not thinking about it at that time because you're passionate about what you're doing.
Yeah,
it comes from the heart, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's genuine, and so because it's genuine, that's why you have this loyal base with you, on YouTube and the different things you do. You have people that support you because it comes from love, and empathy of other people, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's why I admire you, man. That's why I'm one of your big fans on YouTube, because everything you do is because of love, because you love people, you love life, and you could just feel it from just this conversation with you. Is that you enjoy every minute that you're on this earth, and that's important.
Yeah, bro, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's that's where it's at, and it's it's been a journey. It's like the next phase, the next stage is like, I'm still not sure about how the execution with God and stuff. I'm still working on that. But it's coming from the heart. That's the thing, right? And that's, although I break all the rules, because it's like when it comes down to the rules and stuff, it's like, okay, this is the way things should be done. But I tend to follow my heart. I tend to follow my heart. What was it? I think TD Jake said something. I'm like, well, I'm breaking that rule as well. TD Jake said, keeping it real will keep you broke. it's like, hey, you can't really keep it too real. But I'm like, for me, I know I do stuff that probably shouldn't do, like I'm maybe too vulnerable, maybe too transparent, maybe too real, and just be my authentic self.
Yeah.
And that sometimes might not be the best, but I'm like, I can't help myself. I'm like, I think it's the best way to just be, man. I'm like,
no, it is. And that's the one thing that as Black men, we have to be vulnerable. That's one thing we're told at an early age, is not to be vulnerable. It's to set this wall up that, it's okay to be this machismo. But no, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable, because you know what? People appreciate that, because that's, you're genuine. That's who you are. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But going back to, you created this this brand of changing the narrative. Can you kind of talk about like some of like the highs and lows of creating the Black experience in Japan? Can you talk about some of the low moments, like when you felt like, I don't know if this is going to work out, and or as well as, can you talk about like when that moment happens, like, you know what, I got something. This is my niche. This is working.
The thing is, to be honest, that wasn't in my mind.
Okay.
It wasn't. It's like it was when I started the Black experience in Japan, at some points I ran away from it because like when I started it, I did the documentary and stuff, and I was like, I'm like, okay, it might be a bit challenging because you got to find people, right? And it's like, that might be a challenge. So I'm like, I don't know, like you got to find people and you got to, do all this work. And so I did it initially just to answer a question, right? So I never really had, I did find like a book where I wrote down all the stuff that I wanted to do and stuff like that. But I was just doing it out of the love. Like I wasn't trying to, like to say, okay, this is going to make it. This is going to be my thing. This is going to be what I wasn't looking at it as like a niche. I wasn't looking at it as like an opportunity. I legitimately enjoyed the process. That was it. So like I was meeting new people, right? I was hearing their stories. I was editing the videos. Like usually when I went out to did an interview, I would edit it at the same time because I was so excited about it. Like it was really driven by passion, right? So I was just doing it. I was just doing my thing. And I think I stopped for maybe a few months, and I was focusing on live streams and vlogs and stuff. Because I guess it was, I don't know, maybe it was easier to do. I was used to doing that. And then for some reason, BJ kept, it's very weird to explain, but it was talking to me. Right. It's like, because I had like the posters from the launch in my house, and I was looking at it in my office all the time. And like for some reason, I just felt like I was being drawn to it. You know, it's almost like you started something and then you're kind of like, I wasn't focused. It wasn't my
Right.
main focus, but it was for some reason, it was uncomfortable. Like, this thing is calling me so strong. And I'm like, okay, I give it. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna keep that. Literally, that was what happened.
Right.
I was trying to focus on something else, but it kept pulling me, right? That's the truth, 100%.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, cool. Then I started to just continue it, and I started doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it, and then eventually, it just happened. So people keep asking me questions. How? I'm like, I don't know. That's it. You know, and sometimes I think some stories, that's just the way it is, right? Some stories just happen. It's not, maybe God had a plan, and I think God had a plan. So I can't say this was premeditated and I knew exactly what I was doing, right? Because if I did, and I keep telling people, because people ask me about this, it's like I would replicate my success every single time, and it doesn't happen all the time. So I've released so many videos, and some do this, some do that, because if anyone knew the exact formula, every single video would be a hit.
That's true. Very true.
But you don't know how to do it. So that video just happened for whatever reason, and I just kept doing what I was doing. That's pretty much it, and it kind of just got to where it's at today, right? So it wasn't low moments. Was maybe more so, just learning the whole process of how to do the videos editing. I guess I have an eye. I think I have an eye. I do make mistakes sometimes, and all the mistakes I make, I know. So it's not like I'm like, start audio on this one or this on that one. But I wanted to get the story out, so that was my most important thing. So I never really cared. I'm like, you know what, the story is the important thing. I got to get it out. And so more times the equipment maybe wouldn't work as I wanted it to work. I started editing on my phone too. So I did everything on my phone in the beginning, right? Because my motto is, and I've said this before, it's like the thing that I'm trying to do, can I get the job done with the things I have already, right? Of course, yeah, I could maybe try to go and get a camera and get a computer and get all these things, blah, 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 blah. But before I even go there, because this is how I do business from even Canada, it's like, what do I have? Can I get the job done with these resources, right? Without, increasing my expenditure. Can I do it? If I can, I get the job done, and then you work your way from there. So I was doing all that, filming on my phone, editing on the phone, and sometimes that's a little small thing you got in your hands, and you're just like, oh snap! This happened to it. I'm like, oh, this crashed, and then I'm just like, oh my god, and so that was the most challenging part, in the beginning, and I guess I overcame that, so that was it, man. So I think that was a journey. So yeah, that was it.
And it's just amazing to where you're at right now. But out of the 1,000 stories that you've done, which one kind of resonates with you the most? That you relate to the most? Because you've done a lot. There's always that one that you always go back to, and you're like, and it hits your heartstring a little bit.
You know what? I can't say one story because it's not just stories, right? There are people too, and it's like people keep asking me like, which one? I'm like, all of them. Or like it's like a mosaic, and each one represents something. Each one is someone's authentic story, and I think all of them has something in there in some way, shape, or form, that can inform us in some capacity. So I don't want to say this one or that one. They're all unique.
Definitely. That's a great politic way to look at it. If office, I understand. But as a family man, tell me the life experience of living in Japan. A Black family living in Japan, because your wife is a teacher. And what I've learned that your daughter loves school, but walk me into that experience.
Yeah. Well, I guess as a father, I guess two of the most important things for you is you want to be able to protect and provide, right? So especially you want to protect. That's a big thing as well. You want to make sure that you're in a society where you're the minority, like 0.1% maybe or less, and people respond to difference in different ways, right? Sometimes it's not positive. And I have a daughter, right? And she turned 6 last year. And it's like, okay, she's going into school and you want to make sure that she's okay.
Right.
You're just, like fathers and daughters, you're just like, you don't want anyone to mess with your daughter because it's problems.
Right.
So that's one thing that was in my mind. It was, okay, I've heard stories, right? And I'm like, how can I, so these are things that we're thinking about. How can we make, and I think a lot of people in Japan, whether it's mixed kids or black families, or maybe just foreigner families overall, they're trying to find ways to make the transition as smooth as possible. How can I get my child into this school environment and for them to experience as little bullying as possible? And so that was one of the big things that we were thinking about. She's moving into elementary school this year, and apparently from what I've heard, that's a school where these things start to happen.
Right.
So we were thinking about that a lot. And so far so good. Like most kids are fine. Maybe 1 and 2 might not talk to her for whatever reason.
Right.
But I guess that's true across the board in any country you reside in. So far she hasn't had any experiences that would make me want to pull her out of a school or to go up to the school and confront some people, because I'm like, I would do that because I'm like, you don't mess with my daughter. Right. I'm like, I don't care. So far so good. It's cool. But that's the main thing. It's cool. Like, I spend a lot of time with my daughter. I drop her to school now. Usually we take her to the bus. It's fine. I go by the school sometimes. So far it's not bad. Growing up in Japan is so far so good. There were some questions at one point that she asked me as a myself and I think she asked my wife, was asking why is she black.
Wow.
Like why is she different? And it's crazy that she was asking like, why is her like handmade like this color and this side, this color? Why is this white and this black? I don't get it. And when she was in the beginning stages of learning Japanese, she sort of regretted the fact that English was her first language, right? Because she had to like listen. But now she's like learning a lot. She's communicating and stuff now. But initially, going into school,
Right.
already having a foundation of English,
Right.
like, so now you got to observe and try to absorb as much as you can. And she found that challenging. You can imagine, right? You're trying to like a whole new language.
Right.
So I guess she, in the beginning stages, or in the beginning, she was like, like, I wish Japanese was my first language. But now she's cool. She's learning more and more each day. So overall, it hasn't been that big of a challenge. Right. People say elementary school is where stuff happens. But so far, in comparison to elsewhere, she loves it. She loves going to school. Like if for whatever reason she can't go, she would just be like, like she's not happy.
Right.
She was telling us yesterday, I think it was, that she enjoyed staying at school beyond the time, because usually because of the way Japan is, they don't have a lot of like daycare system, right? There's a massive shortage in Japan. That's actually an opportunity for people. I'm like, if someone can think about a business or whatever, because there's a shortage. So schools have this thing where kids can come in very, very early, right, and leave very, very late. So the parent can drop the child off before going to work and pick them up after work, but you got to like pay for the extra time. But she's like, she enjoys being there beyond the time because she gets to play and whatever. Right. So she enjoys being in the environment. So that's cool. So I'm like, okay, she's cool with that. She enjoys it. So it's not, it's not something that's bad for her. She's not being traumatized or experiencing anything that she would say to me, man, I don't want to go to school. So I'm like, that's a good side. Right. So overall, it's been cool. We operate within the house like, I guess, a Jamaican Canadian family. So it's like inside the house is like a foreign land in the country. But we still play Japanese music sometimes. She watches Japanese cartoons and we listen to Japanese and stuff, and we try to like study and just test each other with words and stuff like that sometimes. But it's cool. Like I think it's fine. Of course, no family is perfect. Like, like you might have disagreement with your spouse and stuff like that. And that's totally normal. You got two different people.
Right.
But I think it's a normal family for the most part. I think it's fine. I don't think there's anything. Maybe just the way that Japan as a country operates, you might have to do certain things differently in terms of paperwork and stuff like that. But beyond that, it's pretty norm.
Yeah, because I know, like, in one of your videos, like, your daughter's like the icebreaker. Like, you guys would like do family time, and then they would like see your daughter, they'll light up, and then that kind of start the conversation to adults. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think well, if you think about it, going back to the perception of black people as a black man, if you're big, right, and stuff like that, people might look at you as scary, right? So walking through the street, they see you. If you're too tall or too big, people might be intimidated, right? And like when I'm walking by myself, it's a different experience, right? And then when I'm walking with my wife, a different experience, and as a family, it's a different experience, right? So I think it's from the man alone, very, very intense. The man with a woman, his wife, not as intense or intimidating.
Right.
Then with a daughter, it's like, oh, snap, a normal family. Oh, like, I don't know, for some reason, she represents like this little cute baby and little girl. And they're like, oh, look, kawaii. And then they start with her, and then it makes it easier for them to just converse with us. But if you're by yourself, like me, walking around, some people, maybe men, maybe rarely might say what up or something, but
right,
people are kind of like, I guess a bit scared, I guess, when they see a black man just walking through the street. Yeah, but having a daughter makes it, or a child makes it easier, because Japanese for some reason seem to like kids a lot. So it's funny that they seem to like kids, but they don't have a lot of kids. But it's the work culture, though. It's very, very bad.
Yeah, because it's kind of weird in a way too, because you see like some of the characters they create, they're like this childlike anime, like these almost like doll-like characters that represent certain things. So you don't see a lot of kids, but the way they advertise is kids friendly. So I can't connect it to a little bit. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think they do like kids, but I think it's more so it's not. There's a documentary about why Japanese are not really copulating or having sexual intercourse as much. But I don't think I watched it, but I saw the title of that. But so I don't know about that phenomenon, but I know that the work culture makes it kind of hard. Because I have friends who are seeking a spouse or seeking a partner, like, and they can't find one for some reason, and they're always busy. They're working. Right. So it's like, if you think about it, it's like if you're always working, you don't really have time to even date, right? So then maybe you got to try to find someone online.
Right.
Some people might be too shy to approach a person, so that also is there. And then if you do find someone and you do get married, then it's like, okay, when are you gonna have time to do all these things, to have a child? And I've heard it's kind of weird, but I've heard that apparently, like, after a Japanese woman has a child, the marriage is not treated like a marriage anymore. It moves from a husband and a wife to like a mother-father thing, and they don't really come together as much. That's what I've heard. I don't know if this is right across the board, but it seems like once a baby comes into the mix, the dynamic of the relationship will change, of course, normally, but for some reason, it's almost like the husband and wife part is almost no longer there. It's more so just like a child rearing arrangement, which I've heard. That I haven't delved deeper to try to see if this is true or not, but I think there are different factors overall that why there's a shortage of, like, relationships where they're producing children. But it's affecting the country, as you know, like, it's a declining population, aging population. In a few years, if they don't do something about it, the Japanese people might no longer be here, right? It's kind of crazy to even think about such a world, but something has to be done. And that's why they need more foreigners to come into the country, and especially low-skilled workers who the Japanese people don't want to do those jobs. So they need people from overseas to come and fill those positions, so the country can be productive and they can keep the economy moving forward. So yeah, it's quite a big issue.
Definitely, because I see, like, when it comes to Japan culture, I just feel that they're very resilient because last year was the 75-year anniversary of the bomb that dropped on Hiroshima.
Mhm.
If you think about it, that's not that long ago.
Yeah.
And to be where they're at right now is extraordinary. So I always wondered, like, the kinship between Japanese and Black people, because we've all been through atrocities.
Mhm.
So I thought that would always be a commonality because of the historical past. But again, like you were saying, a lot of people from Japan, they come from like a aloof mindset, like, the perception of Black people because
Mhm.
what they see on TV. Um,
Mhm.
kind of like dive into that a little bit. I don't know. I know that's a little deep, but
Uh,
I always thought because of the historical past, there's some form of connection
yeah.
between Black and Japanese.
Someone also said something similar about South Korea as well, the Koreans, because of what they experienced. And I don't, for some, I don't know if you might have some. I can't speak for the whole populace. First of all, I'm like an outsider. I'm a foreigner, so I don't have much insight in that regard. Um, but I know that some people are aware, and maybe the vast majority aren't, of some of the struggles. They might not know the full story. Uh, they might just have heard maybe bits and pieces from just here and there. I did a short series about what Japanese think about Black people, and some people were offended by it. But I'm just like, look, if you want to know what they think, I got to get some of them and let them speak for themselves, right? So I think that was the best way to do it. So I just put these people in a position where their voices could be amplified, so people could hear their perception. Really, really old people, and young people as well. And for the most part, it was positive. But you got to think about it too, that they're online. They're going to be public facing. They might not say everything they want to say, you know what I'm saying? But they did talk about the perception of like people from Africa based on what they see in media. Because when you see media with Africans, you think Africans are this way based on what you've seen.
Yeah.
So they have that perception. And then when they think about more prosperous countries, they have a different perception because they feel like, well, these people might not be taken from us because they're already okay. But I don't know if they see the sort of intersection, with like their struggles, what they faced with from Hiroshima, the bomb and all that, with what Black people went through. I think that might be a very small percentage of people in Japan that might think about what it feels like, to be, treated in that way, juxtaposed with the Black struggle itself. I think maybe only enlightened few might perceive it that way. But yeah, it's some people. I don't know. Someone wrote a comment in one of the videos I did. I think it was yesterday. I saw this comment, and I'm just like, man. The guy was like, Asians. He said, look, it's just one comment, one perspective. So I'm not saying that this is across the board, because a lot of people get offended really easily. But I'm like, look, it's one person's opinion. He said that he's Asian, and he's saying Asians generally treat all races okay, fine, respectful, until you want to marry one of their child and you're Black. So that's what he's saying. So he's saying, look, as long as they don't care, you're fine, they treat you respectfully, until you're a Black person and you're trying to marry their child, and then you see the racist side come out. Maybe that's his family or his friends. I don't know, but he's saying from his perspective, that's what he thinks. So people, you got different people, man. You got some really cool Japanese that I've met, and some Japanese that don't seem to be too fun. But it's just the way it is. It's humans, right? And that's the thing. That's when we talk about God, and we go down to the narrative of Black people. It's like people talk about sin, and the thing is, like, if we follow what Jesus says, love God, the two greatest commandments. Think about it for a second. Love God with everything within you, and your neighbor as yourself. Racism would not exist if people treated each other the way that they would like to be treated. It's that simple. End of story. It's like if we followed his example, because people sometimes all of us have like light and dark within us, and then he came so that the light can just take over the dark side, right? And we can walk in the light. And it's like these people, the thing is, some people can say that they know Jesus or whatever the case is, but if you're not living your life as he said, that's why when people blame Christians, because they do this to me when I started talking about God, about the slave trade and the Christians. I'm like, look, I understand what you're saying. I'm like, look, sometimes, back in the day, I'm like, man, I wish I could go back in the past. Because I'm like, to wreak havoc. That was what I was thinking in my mind. Because I'm like, I was saying to my wife last night after watching Woodlawn, I'm like, I think God put the most dangerous people in this era. Because I'm like, the black people now, I don't know. I'm just saying I could be wrong. But I'm like, if we were back then, I don't know if I'm like, it's a different story. I'm like, I don't know if y'all could, but I don't know. I could be wrong. But, what I'm saying is that they come in the form of like, oh, I'm Christian or whatever, but anyone can take on a label and say you're something that you're not. No. It's like their actions, their fruit. Yeah. So you cannot be reading from the Bible that says, love your neighbors and stuff, love your enemies. That's what, can you imagine? That's what it says. That's what Jesus says. So if everyone were following that, then we would have no problems, because you wouldn't treat me bad because you don't want to be treated bad. You would give me my fair due because you want to be given your fair due. And that's the thing. So if everyone saw each other like that, you wouldn't be treated anyways. It's crazy how easily the double standards that we have and how easily we treat someone else a certain way. Yep. And I try to do this to myself. Sometimes I think and say, wait, what if I was in this position?
Right.
And I sit with it for a second. Right. And immediately, by putting yourself in someone's shoes like that, you're like, man, okay, snap, that doesn't feel that good.
Right.
I don't like how this feels. Okay, maybe this is what I need to do. And I think if more people did that, right? Because I was watching the movie and I'm like, man, I can't imagine. Can you imagine the hate in someone's heart?
Right.
Do some of the things they did.
Yeah, and I think the hate goes back to insecurity of self. When you're insecure of yourself, usually that's when hate comes out the most. And I think that's the main reason why. But going back to the common theme of everything, the common theme of a lot of your interviews goes back to the concept of freedom. So can you kind of break that down for me? Because I thought that was powerful, especially from your documentary. A lot of Black people that live in Asia, the common theme was freedom, that they felt the true essence of freedom in Asia than they did living in the States.
One question that could be posed is the sense of freedom or the experience of freedom, the way you feel about it, the same as freedom itself? Meaning, because some people would say, well, some of these people, I'm just saying, like, some people would say, well, the more you learn about a country and a society, maybe you wouldn't perceive it the way that some people perceive it. Like, so some people are saying, well, you feel like you're free or you feel like you're safe, but in actuality, you aren't really free and you aren't really safe. So a question to pose would be, what's safety or what's freedom? The feeling of it or the reality of it? I'm like, if you're experiencing it as freedom and safety, I'm thinking that's okay, I think, right? Because some people might say Black people feel a certain way in these countries, but the truth of the matter is, when whatever hits the fan is something else. But most people feel that. Like, they feel like when they go out, they feel like they're okay. No one does anything to them. They're able to go to work, do what they want to do, start things, and just get things done, have peace of mind, all these things. I'm like, people have experienced that for years. Yes, you got good days, bad days like anywhere else, but I'm like, they experience that level of freedom. They experience that level of safety. And as I said, some people do have bad experiences where bad encounters with police, really, really horrible experiences at jobs. So that does exist as well. But at the same time, a lot of people feel safe, feel free. So it's like the baggage you had from somewhere else. You don't have that when you come here. right? Like you feel like you don't have to worry as much. Like I remember this guy in Hokkaido, he said, you got to put an armor on, like elsewhere you're going outside, you got to put this armor on, you got to be ready to go at any moment. In Japan, you're chill, you're laid back, you don't feel like you got to be ready to defend yourself, right? Like when I move around Japan, I'm just chill, I'm just like, I'm cool. And that's why when I had like maybe the 1 and 2 negative experiences, it took a while for me to like get to the breaking point, right? Because I don't walk around just ready to go, because it's not like Jamaica. In Jamaica, you got to be ready to go. Like, at any moment, bro, like someone could try to rob you on the street or some encounter with some dude or something. So you got to be in that frame of mind every time. Yes. It's not even a joke, right? So it's like in Japan, you don't even think about that really. You're just chilling. So it's like, are we really free? Are we really safe? I don't know, but we feel really free and we feel really safe, and we do experience peace of mind. Just like that video I did, the live stream, I'm by the lake. Mount Fuji is right there. I'm chilling, the sunset. Sometimes in the Japanese garden, you go by the river. I go for my runs and stuff. Go like you're running, meditating, whatever, listen to something. You're cool, right? So I'm just like, hey, people feel that. And that's what they experience. Like, so it seems like it's a place where if people think things of you, it mostly exists in their minds. Right. I don't know what the future will look like as more people come over and the country starts to change a bit. But for now and in the past, people have lived there for, decades, and they experience the same thing. So I think that's what people feel.
And I definitely feel, and I think the best advice is when it comes to freedom, going back to what we were talking about before, the discussion about Mount Fuji. I think nature is the great advice when it comes to freedom. Because when I look at the picture of the video you did of Mount Fuji, you see the mountain, you see the sunset, you see the water. That's balance right there. That's freedom right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're one with man, it's a different feeling. That's what I like about Japan. There's a lot of that, like all over. Sometimes I just want to go for like a ride somewhere and just chill. Like when I was doing that tour across Japan, a few prefectures, not the whole Japan, a few prefectures, and I was in the midst of nature, man. And it's a beautiful thing, man. Beautiful feeling.
And that's the one advice I can give to just Black people, just people in general. Just enjoy nature. If you're looking for that answer, go to nature. This is a great conversation. I think I want to do this for like hours because you definitely made this was my bucket list, and it was truly a privilege and an honor to have this conversation with you. Before we end this up, what advice do you have to just people in general that thinking about leaving the States to go to Asia? What advice do you have for them?
Okay. I was thinking about doing a video about something like that. I think one is to understand that Japan or Asia is just another region in the world, right? So there will be people issues, right? People are people wherever you go, right? And you'll find people so it's like, so don't think of it as a place like as a utopia. It's not heaven, right? we're not, heaven is not yet, right? So come with an open mind, right? But at the same time, don't expect it to be perfect all around, right? Because sometimes if you're expecting perfection and you get something with a little blemish, then you're disappointed. Just don't expect perfection, but come with an open mind, ready to pursue your dreams, your goals. Also being willing to be immersed in the community as well, right? In the culture, right? Just try to become a part of it, and just give your best. I think that's pretty much it for the most part. Just don't think it's a utopia. Come to contribute of yourself and pursue your dreams, and take it one day at a time. And I think it should be a better experience in some capacity than what you're used to. It's something different, It's something different. It will add more color to your life, I think.
And this conversation had added a lot of color to my to my light and
Wow.
to my world and everything. Tell the people out there how they can find you.
Okay. All right. So you guys can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at THEBLACKEXJP. And you can find us on YouTube at The Black Experience Japan, on all social media platforms as well. Yeah, thanks a lot.
And the website is on the ticker below. So check out the website.
All right, blackxjp.com. Ishmael, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And you guys have a good night or good morning, wherever you reside from.
Yeah, it's evening time now. What time is it? It's about, let's see. Let me show you real quick. Yeah, it's 5:16 p.m. Sunday.
Yeah, it's 3:16.
Oh, wow. Late, man. Very, very late.
But it's all love, man. And it's truly a privilege and an honor to talk to you, sir. We got to do this again.
All right, bro. Blessings.
All right.
I hope it was good.